Warhammer 40K has spread so far and wide from its humble tabletop origins that I would almost consider the fantasy of being one of the Adeptus Astartes, a space marine, as being on par with being Batman or a Jedi Knight at this point.
Eviscerate this abomination!
And Space Marine 2 brings me closer to that fantasy than maybe any previous game has. At its best, it's practically 40k Nirvana, mowing down disorienting numbers of Tyranids with a heavy bolter or cutting a path through them with a chainsword.
Seconds away, brother!
At times, the controls can get a little clunky, especially on a controller, but I suppose some of that comes with being an 8-foot-tall juggernaut coated in ceramite. I had access to the first little bit of the campaign, which has Clive Standen, aka Rollo from Vikings, giving an inspired, gravelly performance as Captain Titus from the first game.
We will eradicate your kind from the galaxy.
Who is immediately embroiled in some interesting drama with his new squad mates due to his checkered service record. They ultimately set that aside, though, to do battle with the Tyranid hive fleet threatening the soaring Gothic spires of the Imperial world of Avarax.
The Astropath relay is 4 miles from here. Expect heavy Tyranid presence.
What's immediately striking is how detailed and well animated everything on the ground is. From the humble Cadians, who will often kneel and talk in a whisper as the Emperor's angels approach, to the smallest gilded details on the architecture. I don't think I've ever had the feeling of standing on the ground in the Warhammer 40k universe to this level of satisfaction before.
Your punishment is dishonorable death.
The graphics are gorgeous, the chaotic soundscape is spot on, and no expense has been spared, filling every square inch with the kinds of small touches that delighted me as a longtime fan of this franchise. As far as nailing the experience of playing as one of the Emperor's finest, Space Marine 2 generally does a respectable job there as well. Titus and his buddy's Primaris armor is rendered in gleaming fidelity with lots of moving parts, managing to feel imposing and maneuverable at the same time.
Heresy and corruption. The Tyranids seek to consume that as well.
Anytime I got to remove an obstacle through pure super strength was a highlight.
This is evident.
And most of the guns feel great to use, from the classic bolter to a plasma gun that makes enemy armor seem like a joke. I wasn't totally sold on the melee stuff, unfortunately. Carving through gaunts with a chainsword is just as exhilarating as it should be, but Space Marine 2 has also tried to implement a Sekiro-esque system of telegraphed dodges and parries to counter enemy special attacks, and I'm not quite sure if it works here. Maybe 6 hours just wasn't long enough to get the feel for it yet, but I got the sense that it really slowed close combat down with canned animations, breaking up the flow a bit too much. Likewise with the Doom 2016 style finishers, though they are gloriously brutal in their spectacle. You really can't argue with how awe-inspiring it is to see a Space Marine rip a Tyranid warrior's head clean off and discard it like trash. Maybe they're just a bit too long, or they mess with the camera too much, but they feel like breaks in the action rather than part of it. The main enemies in the missions I played were primarily Tyranids, though it seems like the forces of chaos are definitely up to something behind the scenes, as they often are. And the variety of chitinous baddies is pretty impressive, from hordes of regular gaunts who mainly serve to show off your godlike power, to slippery lictors who require a bit more finesse to take down. These guys, likewise, have never looked better in a video game, with some of the more complex model updates from the recent tabletop refresh of the faction shown off in all their creepy splendor. The mode I spent the most time with though is the new 3-player co-op, which seems to be where the meat of Space Marine 2 lies. There are tons of perks and weapon upgrades to unlock, and much to my delight as someone who rolls their eyes at playing boring Ultramarines, character customization includes the ability to unlock armor colors and liveries from dozens of chapters, including both my beloved Space Wolves and some fairly obscure ones. On top of this, you have 6 different classes to choose from, each of which has at least 3 primary weapons to level up, allowing for a huge amount of build diversity. I probably had the most fun with the standard tactical Marine. I know. Right after I said Ultramarines are boring. The Assault Marine can be exciting too, but as I never fully got comfortable with the melee combat, and I also found the jump pack to be really kind of fiddly and inconsistent, it ended up being the build I wish I was good at, but never quite got there. The Heavy Marine is also great fun when you can fire hose away with a heavy bolter and watch an entire swarm evaporate, but they don't have much to do when they're out of ammo, which isn't as big a problem for the other classes. I feel like some levels could use a bit of rebalancing in terms of ammo drops, at least if you have a heavy on the squad. It can be a long time between resupplies.
A fine weapon.
Since I was playing on a pre-release build, I was often paired with bots, and they're not really very good, even on the lowest difficulty. The aforementioned Heavy Marine just isn't that viable because you can't count on your AI teammates to keep strong melee enemies off of you. But when I did match with other humans, I was having a great time. So I imagine this issue will be resolved when the servers are open to everyone. The more linear levels and somewhat clunkier movement is definitely an adjustment when I've played hundreds of hours of Helldivers 2 already this year, but there's no mistaking that I could definitely see myself spending an obsessive amount of time unlocking all the cool visual and mechanical kit for my favorite chapters and classes. Space Marine 2 has a real shot at being the quintessential third-person action game set in the 40K universe. It's exactly what it says on the cargo canister. You get to be an enormous, super strong, nearly invincible battering ram of post-human destruction, slinging retribution at uncountable hordes of Xenos across beautiful, detailed battle spaces that bring this universe to life in a way it never really has been before, ideally with a couple friends. You'll be able to check it out for yourself on September 9th. For more Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2, check out the official gameplay overview trailer as well as the behind the scenes trailer. And for everything else in the world of video games, stick with IGN.